The night before my wedding, I found my best friend of 10 years sitting in my fiancé's car, engine running, lights off, his hand on her face. And the worst part? When I knocked on that window, she didn't even look ashamed. She looked relieved, like she'd been waiting for me to find out. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old. I teach second grade in a small town in Ohio, and up until about 18 months ago, I genuinely believed I was one of the luckiest people I knew. I had a good job, I had a house with a garden I actually used. I had Daniel, kind, patient, funny Daniel, who proposed to me on a Tuesday in October because, as he said, Tuesdays never get enough credit. I laughed so hard I cried, and I said yes before he even finished asking. And I had Mara. God, Mara. We met in college, junior year, randomly assigned as roommates after my original roommate transferred. I walked into that dorm room with a shower caddy and a box of cereal, and Mara was already there, hanging fairy lights above her bed and playing Fleetwood Mac at a volume that probably violated fire code. She looked up and said, "You strike me as a Stevie Nicks person, not a Christine McVie person. Am I right?" I had no idea what she meant. I said, "Sure." She grinned. "Good. We're going to be friends." And just like that, we were. For 10 years, Mara was everything. She was the person I called when my mom got sick. She was the maid of honor I'd already mentally chosen before Daniel and I were even serious. She flew across the country when I went through a bad breakup at 31, just showed up at my door with wine and the kind of no-nonsense honesty that made her her. He was boring, Claire. You were performing yourself for him. You deserve someone who makes you feel like you. She had this way of seeing me. Or I thought she did. Now I wonder how much of it was observation and how much was inventory. Like she was cataloging what I had, what I wanted, what she could use. Daniel and Mara met at a dinner party I hosted about 2.5 years ago. Nothing unusual. I'd been with Daniel for 8 months at that point, and I was so excited to introduce them. These were the two most important people in my life. I wanted them to like each other. They did. A little too easily looking back, but I wasn't looking back then. I was just happy. The three of us started spending a lot of time together. Dinners, weekends. Daniel had a boat, and the summer before he proposed, we took it out almost every Saturday. Mara would come along, bringing that energy she had. Loud and magnetic, and completely comfortable taking up space in a way I'd always quietly envied. I noticed small things, but I talked myself out of every single one. I noticed that Mara started asking about Daniel more than seemed normal. How's he doing? Did he ever end up getting that promotion? What does he think about you going back for your master's? I noticed that when the three of us were together, she found reasons to touch his arm, his shoulder. Nothing romantic, exactly. Mara was physical with everyone. But somehow it felt different when she did it to him. I noticed that she started dressing differently when she knew he'd be around. But this was Mara, and I was with Daniel, and I trusted both of them completely. So when my brain offered up these little whispers of doubt, I shut them down. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, that I was letting anxiety invent problems in a life that was finally, genuinely good. And then Daniel proposed, and I was so swept up in the joy of it that everything else just dissolved. Mara cried when I told her. Real tears. She held me and said, "He's the one, Claire. I knew it the first night I met him. He looks at you like you're the only thing in the room." I held on to that sentence for months. The one thing I eventually figured out was this. She wasn't lying. He did look at me like that. Past tense. Because somewhere between that first dinner and the night I knocked on his car window, something changed. The wedding was 9 months away. I was deep in the planning, juggling a full-time job and venue deposits and seating charts, and Mara was right there with me. She came to every vendor meeting I asked her to. She helped me pick the dress. She sat with me for 3 hours while I agonized over centerpieces. She was present. That's what made it so hard to see. But I started noticing that she and Daniel were texting. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. Why wouldn't my best friend text my fiancé? Except that one evening, I was sitting next to Daniel on the couch, and his phone lit up with her name, and he turned it face down before I could see the message. Just like that. Casual. Like he'd done it 100 times. I said, "Was that Mara?" He said, "Yeah, just something about the bachelor party logistics." He didn't have a bachelor party yet. We hadn't even planned one. I said, "I didn't know she was helping plan that." He said, "She offered. I figured you'd be happy she was taking something off your plate." It was perfectly reasonable. It made complete sense. And yet, I lay awake that night with something cold sitting in the center of my chest that I couldn't explain away. 2 months before the wedding, I started having dreams. Bad ones. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with this crushing sense of wrongness that I couldn't pin to anything specific. I tried to talk to Mara about my anxiety. We had coffee one Saturday morning and I said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I love Daniel. I'm excited, but something feels off, and I can't figure out what it is." She reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "Wedding jitters," she said. "Every bride gets them. It doesn't mean anything." "Yeah," I said. "You're probably right." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Claire, he loves you. Trust that." I want you to sit with that for a second. She looked me dead in the eye. She held my hands, and she told me to trust him. What I understand now, that I didn't understand then, is that people who are doing something terrible often become the most reassuring voices in your life, because they need you not to look too closely. They need you calm and trusting and focused elsewhere. She was managing me. A month before the wedding, my coworker Janet, sweet, nosy, completely unfiltered Janet, mentioned that she'd seen Daniel having lunch with a woman she didn't recognize, downtown, at a place we'd gone to together on our first date. "She was really pretty," Janet said, in that breezy way she had that made everything land like a slap. "Dark hair, laughing a lot. I almost said hi, but they seemed, in their own world." Dark hair, laughing a lot. Mara has dark hair. Mara is always laughing. I said, "That's probably just a colleague." Janet said, "Oh, definitely. I'm sure it was nothing." I went home that night and sat in my car in my own driveway for 20 minutes. Then I went inside and made dinner and didn't say anything to anyone. The thing about being someone who tends toward anxiety is that you learn to distrust your own instincts. You've been wrong before. You've catastrophized before. You've built entire disasters out of nothing and felt humiliated afterward. So when something real comes along, when your gut is actually right for once, you treat it the same way you've treated all the false alarms. You tell yourself to calm down. You tell yourself you're imagining it. You tell yourself you're lucky and loved and you should stop. I spent the next 3 weeks telling myself all of that, right up until the night before my wedding. It was a Friday. The rehearsal dinner had ended an hour ago. Everyone was staying at the same hotel. My family, Daniel's family, the bridal party. It was 11:30 at night, and I couldn't sleep. I'd been lying in my hotel room staring at the ceiling when I remembered I'd left my grandmother's earrings, the ones I was wearing tomorrow, in Daniel's car. He had a bag of my things because we'd come from my apartment together earlier that day. I texted him. No response. I figured he was asleep. I knew which car was his in the parking lot. I just grabbed them myself. I took the elevator down, walked across the lot in my pajamas, found his car. The lights were off. The engine was running. And there was Mara, sitting in the passenger seat, his hand on her face. I stood there for what felt like a full minute before I knocked on the window. Daniel's head whipped around. The blood left his face so fast it looked like something physical had happened to him. He scrambled out of the car, started saying my name. "Claire, wait, let me explain, Claire!" But I was looking at Mara. She got out slowly, deliberately. And her face, I swear to you, was almost peaceful. "Claire," she said. "How long?" I said. She didn't even pretend. She didn't do the thing people do where they deny it, do the thing people do where they deny it until they can't anymore. She just looked at me with those calm, dark eyes and said, 4 months. 4 months. I'd been planning my wedding for 9. She had been helping me plan it for 4 of them while sleeping with the man I was planning it for. She helped me pick my dress. "I didn't want it to happen," she said. "I didn't plan it." Daniel was still behind me, saying my name, and I heard none of it. I was completely focused on her face, on this person I had known for 10 years, and I was waiting for something that felt like her, some flash of the realness I thought I'd seen there. "You told me to trust him," I said. She flinched, just barely. "I know. You held my hands and told me to trust him. A month ago. Claire, were you already sleeping with him then?" She didn't answer, which was its own answer. Daniel touched my arm, and I stepped back from him like I'd been burned. I said very quietly, "Do not touch me." And then I walked back into the hotel, went upstairs, and called my mom. There was no screaming, no dramatic confrontation in the parking lot. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect that part, the meltdown, the exploding, the public spectacle. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter and, in some ways, much worse for them. I called my mom. I told her. She came to my room and sat with me until 4 in the morning, while I cried and then didn't cry and then cried again. At 7 a.m., I called the venue. At 7:15, I called the caterer. At 8, I put on the dress I'd brought to wear to brunch that morning. Not the wedding dress, just a regular dress, a blue one that I liked. And I went downstairs to the room where Daniel's family was already eating breakfast. I walked up to his mother, who I genuinely loved, and I said, "The wedding isn't happening today. I'm sorry. This isn't your fault." She started crying. She already knew something had happened. Daniel had apparently told her in the middle of the night. She grabbed my hands and said, "Claire, I am so sorry. I raised him better than this." I believed her. I still do. The venue kept half my deposit because of the short notice. The caterer kept a little more. I lost almost $4,000 that day in cancellation fees. I want you to know I do not regret a single dollar. What happened to Mara and Daniel afterward was something I didn't engineer. I didn't have the energy or the desire for scheming. I was just trying to survive. But here's the thing about starting something built on betrayal. It doesn't suddenly become solid just because it's out in the open. They tried. I heard through mutual friends, because small towns are small, that they dated for about 6 months after everything fell apart. That they seemed happy at first. That Mara moved into his apartment. And then I heard that it ended. Badly. Apparently Daniel had been unfaithful to Mara too, which, looking back, should surprise exactly no one. She called me once, about 8 months after everything. I saw her name on my phone and I sat very still for a long moment. Then I let it go to voicemail. She said, "I know you don't want to hear from me. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For real. And I think I understand now what I did to you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it." I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Then I deleted it. Because here's what I know about apologies. They're for the person giving them, not the person receiving them. She needed to say it. That's fine, that's her business. But it wasn't something I was required to carry. My silence was the only thing I had left to give her, and I chose to keep it. I'm not going to tell you the next year was easy. It wasn't. I had to go back to work 2 days after the day my wedding was supposed to happen, and I taught a full week of school with sunglasses on because my eyes were so swollen I looked like I'd lost a fight. One of my second graders, a little girl named Abby, walked up to my desk that first morning and said, very seriously, "Miss Claire, did you get hurt?" I said, "A little bit, sweetie, but I'm okay." She patted my hand. "My mom says sometimes you have to cry so you can feel better." 7 years old. Completely correct. I got therapy. Good therapy. With a woman named Dr. Renata, who had the kind of blunt compassion that Mara used to have, or that I thought Mara used to have, and who helped me understand something important. I hadn't been stupid. I hadn't been blind. I had been trusting. And those are not the same thing. Trusting someone is not a flaw. The flaw was theirs. The betrayal was theirs. I had been a good friend and a loving partner, and the fact that those things were taken advantage of said nothing about me and everything about them. I also had to grieve the friendship more than the relationship. That surprised me. I thought losing Daniel would be the hardest thing. But Daniel, if I'm honest, was someone I loved and someone I'd built a future with, and that hurt was enormous. But Mara was someone I had known, or thought I'd known. And losing her felt like losing a version of my own history. 10 years of memories that I now had to re-examine. Every vulnerable thing I'd told her. Every fear. Every dream. I had to decide what to do with all of that. How to hold it. What I landed on was this. The earlier years were real. The friendship was real. I don't think Mara set out to be someone who would do what she did. I think she made a choice, and then another choice, and then she was too far in to see the cost clearly. That doesn't excuse it, but it makes it human. I don't hate her. I don't think about her much anymore. That's not forgiveness, exactly. It's just distance. The kind that comes with time and intention. About a year after everything, I started dating again. Slowly, carefully, with about 3 times the attention I used to pay to small things. I met someone. His name is Marcus. He's a high school history teacher, and he drives a 10-year-old Subaru, and he laughs at his own jokes a half second before the punchline. which should be annoying, but is somehow the most endearing thing I've ever seen. On our third date, I told him what had happened. Not all of it, just the shape of it. The canceled wedding. The best friend. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he said, "That's a lot to carry." I said, "I've mostly put it down." He said, "Good. You look like someone who's better off traveling light." We've been together for 8 months. There's no ring. There's no rush. I teach my second graders, and I work in my garden, and I drive to Marcus's apartment on Friday nights, and we cook dinner, and argue about whether James K. Polk is criminally underrated, and I fall asleep feeling like myself, which is, I think, all I ever actually wanted. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's not about betrayal. It's not even about trust. It's about the moment after. The moment when everything you thought was solid turns out to be built on something hollow. And you're standing in a hotel parking lot at midnight in your pajamas, with $4,000 in cancellation fees ahead of you, and the rest of your life waiting. That moment is terrifying. And it is also, I know now, the beginning of something. The people who betrayed me didn't take my future. They just clarified it. And I think that's worth something. So, if you're watching this, and you have that cold thing sitting in the center of your chest that you can't explain, the one I had for months before I let myself see it, I want you to hear this. Your instincts are not your anxiety. Learn the difference. It might save you a year of your life. It saved me mine.